Welcome today in the third lecture of our module, which is Neuroscience 2. The third lecture is called Brainstem and Cerebrum. The first session in the lecture today, we will discuss brainstem and the components of the brainstem. Let's start. The brain, at the first, you must know that it is formed of multiple parts. The first part of the brain is called cerebrum. The second part of the brain is called cerebellum. The third part is called brainstem. Let's go to the diagram on the right side. We can see here that the brainstem from above to below is formed of three compartments. The first compartment is called midbrain, which is colored green here. The second part is called pons, which is purple in color. And the third part, which is rostral in position, it's called medulla, which is blue in color. The brainstem, you must know at first that midbrain, bones, and the medulla, they are connected to the cerebellum. They are connected to the cerebellum through three peduncles. What about peduncles? There are three peduncles in our central nervous system called three cerebellar peduncles. The first peduncle, which is called SCP, this is abbreviation for superior cerebellar peduncle. And the second peduncle is called MCP, which is abbreviation for middle cerebellar peduncle. And the last one is called ICP, which is called inferior cerebellar peduncle. Okay. Now we will talk about every part in the brainstem in details. The first part from below is medulla oblongata. What about medulla oblongata? Medulla oblongata, it is the most caudal part of the brainstem, okay? It begins rostral to the first cervical spinal nerve. It just above the first cervical segment of a spinal cord. It is connected to the cerebellum through inferior cerebellar peduncle. Increase in size as compared to spinal cord. So, when I can see the spinal cord cervical segment and the medulla oblongata, I can notice that the medulla is increased in size as compared to the spinal cord. What about the characteristic features of medulla oblongata? The medullary pyramid appears ventrally, okay? So I can see the pyramid of the medulla appear at the anterior aspect of the medulla oblongata. What others? The olivary complex appear ventrolaterally. Okay. The lower four cranial nerves emerges from the ventral and lateral sources. So the characteristic features of the medulla oblongata is three features. The first feature is the pyramid appear at the anterior aspect ventrally, then olivary complex appear ventrolaterally, then lower four cranial nerve, which are 12, 11, 10, and 9, emerge or arise from the ventral and lateral sources of the medulla oblongata. Here we can see this diagram of the brainstem. In the part of, we can see here clearly on the right side bones and the medulla, okay? On the left side bones also at above, okay? And the medulla present below. What about the external feature? External feature on the right side here, we can see that the pyramid present anteriorly, okay? Labeled pyramid. Then olive labeled here. Here on the right side also there is hypoglossal nerve, which is the nerve of 12, okay, 12th nerve. On the left side the photo show us the pyramid present anteriorly. This is the ventral aspect of the medulla oblongata, then olive present anterolaterally. Okay, here we can see middle cerebellar peduncle also, which is present here. Okay, this is one of the three peduncles as I have mentioned before. The brainstem. What about medulla oblongata? You must know the external and internal features. What about the internal feature? How I can differentiate between medulla oblongata and cervical segment of spinal cord? Let's see. On the left side, okay, let's remember the cervical segment of a spinal cord. What is the shape? Here the shape was oval in shape, okay, the outline of the cervical segment of spinal cord here. I explain on the left diagram. I can see that the outline of this structure is oval. Okay, as regard the gray matter, what is the characteristic feature? Here I can see that the anterior horn is thick, then I can notice the posterior horn is thin. What others? Gracile and cognate present, comma-shaped tract present in between, and ascending tract, as I have discussed with you before, on the right side, arranged on the right side, and the second or the left side, I can see the motor or descending tracts. Let's go to the right diagram, which is medulla oblongata. Okay, let's see what are the characteristic features of the medulla oblongata. Here we can see that there are multiple features on the medulla oblongata. I can see that gracile nucleus and gracile cuneate, okay, as a posterior aspect, then cuneate nucleus and the tract. I can notice that there are spinal nucleus and the spinal tract, okay, of trigeminal. What others? Here we can see that lateral corticospinal and rubrospinal tract here, making motor decussation, which pass to go to the pyramidal tract in front of or on the anterior aspect of the brainstem or medulla oblongata especially. What are the features? Here in this diagram on the right side, I saw what I show, okay, that internal changes in the transition from spinal cord, what are the changes that happened? Number one, motor. There are pyramidal decussation appeared in the medulla oblongata. What other? Sensory decussation I will see later on in another diagram, okay? This is not present in the cervical segment of spinal cord. What other differences? Replacement of Lissauer tract. You remember Lissauer tract, which was in the cervical segment of spinal cord? Okay, now there is replacement of Lissauer tract by descending tract of trigeminal nerve. What other differences? Replacement of substantia gelatinosa nuclei or cells by descending spinal nucleus of trigeminal nerve. What other? Replacement of central gray matter by the reticular formation. And the last change, that development of the nuclei of cranial nerve, which are the last cranial nerves in the medulla oblongata, which arise from the medulla oblongata in the brain stem. Okay, let's go to the level of the medulla. The medulla oblongata, okay, arranged into two levels. The level 1 is called closed medulla, and the other level is called open medulla. As regard the closed medulla, where the central canal is still found, so how I can know that it is closed medulla or open? Okay, when I see central canal present in the diagram or present in the photo, so it is closed medulla. But when central canal absent and replaced by ventricle, so it is called open medulla. As regards the closed medulla, where the central canal is still found, okay, it is also subdivided into two levels. The level 1 is called level of motor decussation, and the second level is called level of sensory decussation, which is found dorsally. Okay, as regards the level of open medulla, I can know that this is open medulla or not when I can see that central canal is absent and replaced by ventricle. Here we can see on the right side that the first photo present above, this is closed medulla because central canal is still present, but here not clearly. Okay, but on the diagram or photo which present below, okay, this is open medulla because the fourth ventricle appear here, and there is no central canal. As regard the closed medulla, the level of motor decussation. What happened in the level of motor decussation? Let's remember what happened in descending tract, which was corticospinal tract, okay? On the left side here in this diagram, I can see that this is medullary pyramid, okay? And passing through its lateral corticospinal tract, which is present laterally, then anterior corticospinal tract, which is present anteriorly, and anterolateral corticospinal tract, which is present anterolateral between the previous two. Okay, let's go to the diagram on the right side. This is closed medulla. This is level of motor decussation. How I can know? Okay, let's see. Here I can see that gracile and the cuneate tract not well developed, okay, but tract of gracile and the tract of cuneate is more developed. Number one feature, okay. Here I can see also that the lateral corticospinal, which take the shape of the pyramid on both sides, making decussating fibers, okay, which is labeled by motor decussation, to pass to enter the pyramidal tract finally, which is present on the anterior aspect. So the features are that lateral corticospinal making decussating fiber, which are motor decussation. So, and ventrally, I can see the pyramid or pyramidal tract present on the ventral aspect of the closed medulla level or medulla oblongata. What about closed medulla, but at the level of sensory decussation? How I can see, how I can know that this is closed medulla sensory decussation? Let's go to the posterior aspect. Here I can see gracile nucleus and the cuneate nucleus. You can notice that gracile nucleus is very well developed, and the tract of gracile is small in area, replace small area, okay. But cuneate nucleus, okay, well developed also, okay. And here accessory cuneate nucleus present at the posterior aspect of the cuneate nucleus. So gracile and the cuneate nuclei are well developed at the closed medulla at sensory decussation. What other features? Other feature that here, when I can see, notice in the gracile and the cuneate nuclei, there are sensory fibers arise from both nuclei, making decussation, which is called internal arcuate fibers. These internal arcuate fibers making decussation at the midline to pass through structure, which is called medial lemniscus here. Okay, so what are the characteristic features of the medulla oblongata, closed medulla, sensory decussation? Number one, I will look at gracile and the cuneate nuclei. When they are well developed, okay, and reach near the end of the medulla oblongata boundary, okay, this is closed medulla sensory decussation. What other features? Internal arcuate fibers, which pass to make sensory decussation. This is a very important feature in this level. Let's go to open medulla. Open medulla here, did you remember what is the difference between closed and open medulla? Okay, open medulla, when there is no central canal present. Here, this is ventricle present, okay? As a posterior aspect, you can see that this open area, this is called fourth ventricle. Okay, please look at the diagram. This diagram takes the shape of butterfly. This is butterfly in shape, okay? So, number one feature is butterfly in shape structure. Number two, this is there is fourth ventricle. There is no central canal. Okay. Number three, from anterior to posterior, you can notice that anterior part present in its pyramid and lateral part present in its olivary complex, which is tortuous structure. This is inferior olivary nucleus or inferior olivary complex. Then finally, at the posterior aspect, this is ICP, which is inferior cerebellar peduncle. So the features pyramid on the anterior aspect, followed by main olivary complex, which take the shape of tortuous structure like worm, okay, and on the posterior aspect I can see there is fourth ventricle, and the main outline of the medulla oblongata is butterfly in shape. Let's go to the second part in the brainstem. What about bones? Bones is formed of two parts mainly. The first part is base pons, which present anteriorly, and the second part is called tegmentum pons, which present posteriorly. Here they are arranged as number 1 tegmentum pons present posteriorly on the posterior aspect of the bones, but number 2 base pons present anteriorly on the ventral aspect of the bones. Okay, what are the features? Number 1, we can see that the base pons, which present anteriorly, formed of multiple structures. These are structures, the main 3 structures present on the base pons are rounded areas, which are bundles of corticospinal tract. Okay, transverse fibers, which called the transverse pontine fibers, dots, which present in the area of the base pons, which called pontine nuclei. As regards the posterior aspect of the tegmentum pons, here we can see that there are multiple nuclei of cranial nerve. Okay, you must know that cranial nerves which arise from the bones are 5, 6, 7, and 8 nuclei. So trigeminal, abducent, facial, and vestibulocochlear nerve. Here we can see that there is the nucleus of facial, okay, present on the tegmentum pons, making colliculus turn around the nucleus, which is of the nerve, abducent nerve. So abducent nerve surrounded by the fibers of facial nerve, making facial colliculus. This elevation, which protrude on the posterior aspect of tegmentum pons, is called facial colliculus. Okay, I can see also that MCP present on both sides of the diagram. This is called middle cerebellar peduncle, which connect the bones to the cerebellum. Again, okay, here we can see in the bones that there are base pons and tegmentum pons, as I have said before. What are the structures of the base pons? I can see here that 3 labeled structures, which are very important. The first structure from above, this is called longitudinal fibers. Okay, second part below, it's called transverse pontine fibers, passing transversely in the base pons, and pontine nuclei, which are present between longitudinal fibers and transverse pontine fibers. These are the 3 characteristic features which are present, or component which are present in the base pons. Okay, here we can see in the tegmentum pons, this is a posterior aspect, as I have said before, in the bones. It is the upward continuation of the medulla. What are the components inside the tegmentum pons? Number 1, cranial nerves, which are 8, 7, 6, and 5. 8 is called vestibulocochlear nerve, 7 is called facial nerve, 6 is called abducent nerve, and 5 is called trigeminal nerve. What are other components present here? Number 2, we can see ascending and descending tracts. Number 3, we can see pontine reticular formation. On the diagram on the right side, we can see on the right side, these are spinal nucleus and spinal tract of trigeminal. On the left side, labels. We can see superior vestibular nucleus and lateral vestibular nucleus. Below is called here 6 nucleus. Okay, this is the nucleus of abducent, and finally motor nucleus of trigeminal. Okay, let's discuss the 3 levels of the bones. Bones arranged into 3 levels, which are superior level, middle level, and inferior level. From below to above, okay, bones inferior level, we will discuss it at first. Here we can see the bones at the inferior level. What are the characteristic feature? The same feature of the bones. Anterior part, basal bones, containing what? Containing bundles of corticospinal, transverse pontine fibers, and pontine nuclei. As regard tegmentum bones, present at the posterior aspect, containing multiple nuclei, which are the nuclei of cranial nerves and tracts also. Okay, what are the nuclei here? Nucleus of trigeminal, nuclei of cranial nerve starting from 5, 6, 7, and 8. 5 which is trigeminal, 6 which is abducent, 7 which is facial, and finally 8 which is vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, you can see here that the middle cerebellar peduncle present clearly on both sides of the inferior level of bones. As regards the middle level, it becomes smaller in size. Fourth ventricle here and the posterior at the posterior aspect present concised. Okay, anterior part is called also basal pontus, containing the same structures which are pontine nuclei, transverse pontine fibers, and corticospinal. As a posterior aspect containing what? Containing main feature which are main sensory nucleus and motor nucleus of trigeminal and mesencephalic nucleus. These are nuclei of trigeminal nerve. You can see that SCP on both sides of fourth ventricle, which is superior cerebellar peduncle, present at this level. You can see that middle cerebellar peduncle, which is abbreviated by MCP, present on both sides of basal pons. As regards the bones at the level of superior level of bones, here we can see it becomes smaller, more smaller in size. Okay, I can see that basal pons here containing the same structures, which are bundles of corticospinal, pontine fibers, transverse pontine fibers, and pontine nuclei. I can see that MCP or middle cerebellar peduncle present on both sides of basal pons. At the tegmentum pons, here we can see that SCP superior cerebellar peduncle present clearly here, and mesencephalic nucleus present at the posterior aspect. This is the nucleus of trigeminal nerve, and other tracts as before segments or before levels. What about the third part in the brainstem? You know that the brainstem is formed of what? Midbrain, bones, and the medulla. As regard the midbrain, it is formed of 3 main parts. What are the 3 main parts? From anterior to posterior, the anterior part is called the crus cerebri, followed by tegmentum, followed by tectum. Or when you say them from posterior to anterior, you will say tectum, tegmentum, and the crus cerebri. Okay, here we can see tectum at the posterior part or posterior aspect of midbrain. Tegmentum, it is the middle part between tectum and anterior part, which is crus cerebri. Let's talk about every part separately. The midbrain is formed of tectum, tegmentum, and crus cerebri. Okay, as regards the tectum, it present dorsal to the cerebral aqueduct. It contains 4 colliculi, 2 at the superior level, 2 superior colliculus, and 2 at the inferior level, which are 2 inferior colliculus or inferior colliculi. Then crus cerebri, the ventrolateral part. This is the ventrolateral part in the midbrain. It contains what? Descending cortical projections. What other? The third part, which is called tegmentum, it is the rostral continuation of the tegmentum pons. Did you remember that bones is formed of basal pons and tegmentum pons? So the continuation of tegmentum pons is called here tegmentum. It is the part between tectum and the crus cerebri, because the arrangement from posterior aspect to anterior aspect are as follow: tectum, tegmentum, then crus cerebri anteriorly. As regard tegmentum, it contains cranial nerve nuclei, it contains ascending sensory pathways, contains also extrapyramidal centers, which are red nucleus, okay, red nuclei on both sides, red nucleus and substantia nigra. Here we can see that the structure of crus cerebri. What are the components of crus cerebri? Crus cerebri is segmented into main three parts, from medial to lateral. The medial 1/5 containing inside frontopontine fibers. Okay. The lateral 1/5 containing inside temporoparieto-occipitopontine fibers. That means containing temporopontine, parieto-pontine, and occipitopontine fibers. At the middle, okay, middle 3/5 containing corticospinal and corticobulbar fibers. So the structure of crus cerebri are medial 5th containing frontopontine, lateral 5th containing temporo and parieto and occipitopontine fibers, and the middle 3/5 containing corticospinal and corticobulbar fibers. Here again, crus cerebri, this is the most ventral part of midbrain, occupied by what? By descending fibers from the cerebral cortex, which are frontopontine fibers, most medial, okay, 1/5, temporo, parieto, and occipitopontine fibers in most lateral 1/5 rely on pontine nuclei giving to cerebellum. Then corticobulbar and corticospinal fibers, which are present in the intermediate 3/5 corticobulbar fibers medial to corticospinal fibers. This is the arrangement of these fibers in the crus cerebri. What about the midbrain inferior level? Okay, midbrain, you will know that it is we will discuss midbrain at two levels, superior level and inferior level. What about superior level and inferior level? At first, you must know that the midbrain arises from its two cranial nerves, which are third cranial nerve and fourth cranial nerve, trochlear and oculomotor nerve. So, midbrain at the superior level, this is the level which arises from its third cranial nerve, which is oculomotor. And midbrain at the inferior level, this is the level which from it arises fourth cranial nerve, which is trochlear. Okay. At the inferior level here, on the posterior aspect, we can see that the trochlear nucleus arises from its trochlear nerve fibers, making decussation at the posterior aspect of the midbrain. This is the only nerve fiber, okay, which arises from the posterior aspect of brain stem. We can notice that there is no red nucleus. What about red nucleus? At the midbrain superior level, I will say that the characteristic feature of this level is presence of red nucleus. So, at the inferior level, when there is no red nucleus, this is the level of inferior midbrain. Again, what about midbrain superior level? Here we can notice that red nucleus present on both sides, two red nuclei, one on the right side and one on the left side present here. Okay, large nucleus present on the just behind the crus cerebri. Presence of this structure, red nucleus, is very characteristic to superior level of midbrain. Okay. Let's go to the second part of the lecture today, which is called cerebrum. What about cerebrum? Cerebrum is very important structure in the central nervous system. Okay? As regard ILOs, by the end of this lecture, you will be able to list the cells of cerebral cortex. This is number one. Describe the structure of the cells of cerebral cortex, list the layers of cerebral cortex, describes the structure of each layer of the cerebral cortex, and finally, you can differentiate between the structure of sensory and motor cortex. Let's talk about the cerebrum. The cerebrum is formed of gray matter and white matter, such as every part in the central nervous system. Here we can see that the gray matter laminated on the right side on the diagram or the photo on the right side, we can see that gray matter laminated and has 6 layers. Meanwhile, white matter present inside. You can notice here that the arrangement of gray matter and white matter opposite to what happened before in the cervical segment and thoracic and spinal cord at all. You can remember that at the spinal cord, gray matter present inside and white matter present outside. But here in the cerebrum, okay, the opposite occur. That white matter present inside covered by gray matter from outside. Here we can see on the left side that this is the shape of the brain or cerebrum. You can see that the surface is not smooth. It is folded up and down. Make elevation and depression. The elevation are called gyri and single of it is called gyrus, and depressions are called sulci and single of it is called sulcus. So I can see elevation which is called the gyrus and depression which is called sulcus. The surface of the cerebrum contains sulci, which are grooves separated from each other by wide areas are called gyri. Gray matter, what about the gray matter? Gray matter present here, not inside, present outside. Gray matter covers the gyri and lines the sulci. It is formed of nerve cells, neuroglia, and the blood capillaries. As regard white matter, it is deep to the gray matter. It is formed of nerve fibers, neuroglia, and the blood capillaries. Cells of cerebral cortex. What about cells of cerebral cortex? You must know the names of the cells of the cerebral cortex. The first one today is called pyramidal cells. From its name, you can expect that it takes the shape of pyramid or triangular in shape. Okay, so pyramidal cells are triangular or pyramidal in shape, having dendrites arise from its body and one axon arise from the cell itself. As regards the second type of cell in the cerebral cortex, this is called the granule cell. Granule cells arranged in layers, 2 layers in the cerebral cortex, which are called external granular layer and internal granular layer. So, what are the features of the granular cells? They are small polygonal cells. The size of each cell is 5 to 7 micrometer. They give rise to short dendrites in the same layer. Other cells give long dendrites that pass to reach the surface. Okay, as regards the axon, their axons terminate in the deep cortical layer. The third cell today in the cerebral cortex is called the fusiform. Each one has a spindle-shaped cell body. As regards the shape, okay, you can see here on the right side diagram that the cell which is fusiform, it is spindle in shape, okay, arise from it dendrites, which is labeled by letter D, and arise from it one axon here. Each one has a spindle-shaped cell body. The dendrites arise from the 2 poles of the cell, okay. The axon arise from the middle part of the cell body to pass to the white matter. The fourth cell in the cerebral cortex is called cells of Martinotti. These are called cells of ascending axons, present in all layers, okay? It is named by this name because it has axon which is ascending, okay. What others? They have cell of Martinotti, you can see on the diagram here, okay, very small body, having axon which ascend, okay, to reach the molecular layer or the most superficial layer. They have a small triangular cell body, okay, and their axon extended to reach a superficial layer of cerebral cortex. Horizontal cell of Cajal, this is the fifth type of cell in the cerebral cortex. They have spindle-shaped cell, okay? They are spindle in shape. You can see on the diagram here, it is labeled horizontal cell of Cajal. As regards the site of this cell, it present in the superficial layer. As regards the layers of cerebral cortex, we can know today that the cerebral cortex is formed of 6 layers. What about the names of these layers? You will arrange it from 1 to 6 as follows. The first one is called molecular layer. Second one is called external granular layer. Third one is called external pyramidal cell layer. Fourth one is called internal granular. Fifth one is called internal pyramidal cell, or the other name is called ganglionic layer. And the last one is called multiform cell layer or polymorphic cell layer. Okay. Each one separately, the first one is called molecular. What about molecular layer? You must know that it contains the cells of Cajal and Golgi type 2 cells. What other? It contains also terminal dendrites of pyramidal and fusiform cells and axon of cell of Martinotti. As regards the second one, which is called external granular layer, it is formed of closely packed granule cells. Okay, what others? Containing also their dendrites to terminate in the molecular layer. What other? Their axon descend to deep cortical layer. As regards the third layer, which is called external pyramidal layer, it contains a superficial layer, okay, superficial layer of small and medium-sized pyramidal cell. Okay, you must know that pyramidal cell having 3 types: small, medium, and large-sized pyramidal cell. So, small and medium-sized pyramidal cells are found in the external pyramidal layer. As regards the dendrites, their dendrites pass to the first layer while their axons enter the white matter. As regards the fourth layer, which is called internal granular layer, it contains granule cells as second layer. Outer band of the larger, which is band of tangential fibers. Here I can see this structure on the diagram, which is present on the left side, labeled this is outer band of the larger, which is made by internal granular layer. What about internal pyramidal cell layer? This is the fifth layer in the cerebral cortex. It's formed of large cell, which is pyramidal cell, okay, large and joint pyramidal cells. Dendrites pass to the fourth layer. Axons project to enter the white matter as projection fibers. In motor area, okay, 4, these cells are called giant cells of Peetz. This is the name of giant cell in the motor area 4. It contains the internal band of the larger. Okay, finally, as regards the sixth layer in the cerebral cortex, it's called the multiform layer. What are the components of multiform layer? It contains the fusiform cells. Dendrites pass to the molecular layer, and the axons enter the white matter as projection. Here we can see inner band of the larger, also labeled in this diagram on the left side. Here we can see the layers again on the diagram on both sides. The first layer is called molecular, second layer is called external granular, third layer is called external pyramidal, fourth layer is called internal granular, fifth layer is called internal pyramidal, and the last one, sixth layer, is called multiform layer. What about the difference between sensory and the motor cortex? Is there any difference between? Yes. there is difference between motor and sensory cortex. As regard motor cortex, okay, it is the thickest zone in the whole cortex, so it is thick. Okay. Number two, it has large pyramidal cells are found in layer 3 and 4. The third difference, that granule cells are rare or absent. What about sensory cortex? It is relatively thinner than motor cortex. Okay. Number two, it contains closely packed granule cells. Third difference between that pyramidal cells are still ill-defined. So the difference between motor and cortex, that motor is thicker than sensory, that motor containing large pyramidal cell, but sensory closely packed granular cell more, that motor contain granule cells, rare, but sensory containing pyramidal, ill-defined. Okay, in this diagram showing us differences between sensory and motor cortex, I can see that motor cortex is thicker than sensory. I can see that motor cortex contain large pyramidal cells, meanwhile at the sensory cortex containing more granular cells or granule cells. This is the difference again. Motor cortex, it is the thickest zone in the whole cortex, containing large pyramidal cells which are found in layer 3 and 5, contain granule cells but very rare or maybe absent. As regards sensory cortex, it is relatively thinner than motor cortex. It contains closely packed granule cells which present in large number, and the pyramidal cells are very little and ill-defined. At the end of this lecture, I'd like to thank you so much. Okay, good luck, and see you in the next lecture, inshallah.